and I'm third generation General Motors worker. I started working at GM in 1977 at Clark Street Assembly, building Cadillacs. We built the Eldorados, Fleetwoods, Coupe de Billes, sedans, limousines. That plant started building vehicles in 1907. Well, they had since shut down in 1985. My father retired with 34 years when they shut down, and they shipped me to GM Powertrain, which is in Romulus, building the big V8 motors for the Escalades, Denali's, Hummers, Sierras, Silverados. Well, in 2009, the auto industry took a flop for the worst, and they started begging for money to keep their companies open. And they went to Washington to borrow a bunch of money. Well, they had mismanaged terribly, and they had just introduced a new contract to where new employees starting out work for half the amount of money that we make, starting out at $14.71 with no benefits, and build your own retirement in a 401. Well, I knew that it was probably going to be the last buyout that they offered, so I took a retirement at 52 years old. I could have worked another 10 years. Easy. I'm still in good health. But I took my pension, my buyout money, and my benefits, and I got out of there. Now, they're on the rebound because wages they're $14 an hour, getting people to work for that now, instead of 28. So, the moral of the story is it's still all about greed, corporate greed. Whoever dies with the most wins. And that is how the auto industry in Detroit is all about. It's greed. The big people want it all, and they're just.
Can you tell me how the death of the auto industry not only affected Detroit, but how it expanded and affected everyone throughout the country?
All of the manufacturing companies that builds the parts, the components to build the vehicle, everything went south. They started out in Mexico. Then it went to Brazil. Then it went to China. Then it went to, now they're even trying it in Korea. And all these third world countries that are communist, these people are building our products over there for 25 or 30 cents an hour. It's like slave labor. Okay, well, the quality of the components that these people are making is garbage. Now, my question is if they're over there building all of the components and the steel and everything else, and they're dumping all of their pollutants because there's no EPA regulations in Mexico and China, and all them kids are drinking out of creeks that are toxic because they're just dumping it like they used to do in the Detroit River in the 50s.
They used to dump the toxins into the Detroit River?
Sure, that's why all the factories like Uniroyal and McLeod Steel and Great Lakes Steel and Ford Rouge and all them were all built along that riverfront because they could dump everything in there and they never got caught. Well, 30 years of that shit and the water was completely polluted. And here comes the EPA. Well, we got regulations now to where you can't do that anymore.
Right.
Affecting everyone's health.
Right.
Just like, for example, today, They want to develop the old Uniroyal plant that's adjacent to Belle Isle in Detroit. Well, they've been storing their slag that's coming out of the furnaces along that riverfront, and it's got coke pollutants all in the ground, and they can't touch it.
Well, the first thing I did when I got to Detroit yesterday is I parked my vehicle, pulled my bicycles out, and took my son out on a bike ride. We ended up right there on the river, and it looks like they've revitalized that area and built a bike trail. And we bicycled all along the bike trail as far as we possibly could go.
Where did you go?
We went all the way along the bike trail. There's a bike trail on the other side of the...
Wyandotte or south of Wyandotte?
I think south of it. And we went all the way down, all along, and then till it ended, and then we cut through the city. And as I cut through the city on the one side of it and came back through, I saw that there was an old high school that looked pretty much abandoned to me. And then there was a field, a football field, or maybe even a baseball field, or maybe both. And then we came up the other side through housing complexes. And there was this housing complex after housing complex after housing complex. Right. And then I crossed another bike trail that looked like it went underneath me and had been freshly painted. Something new they're trying to revitalize. So I know that there's some revitalization going on in Detroit. But then when I went out Woodward, I biked all the way out Woodward till pretty far. We went at least 7 to 10 miles out Woodward. And I took a lot of photographs along Woodward, and my son kept asking me, you know, Dad, why are all these buildings gone? Where is everybody? What happened? And my interpretation is the reason why the motor industry died was, like a lot of other Americans, is the gas prices caused it, that the petroleum caused it, that the wars is somehow affecting it. And, you know, as a worker yourself who worked in, you said which company again?
Well, General Motors.
General Motors. You worked for General Motors for how many years?
32.
32 years. So after 32 years of working for General Motors and seeing General Motors at its height get to the point where it was asking the government for money, as an employee and a person who worked for General Motors, what killed the auto industry?
Greed.
Greed killed the